Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to trèSci episode 50.
Woo!
My name is Tom Kea. I'm here with my buddy, co-host as always, John Hotz.
What's going on?
That's spelled with a 0 and 3 Z's if you're wondering.
Yes. 2 lowercase, 1 capital. To be very specific. Tom, how are you?
Doing good, man.
Glad to hear it. Welcome back after being absent last week. Hope you're feeling well and better.
Welcome back as Kyle as well.
Welcome back to Kyle after a nice relaxing vacation. And I know that you're not feeling so hot right now. So thank you for soldiering through on episode 50, our 1-year anniversary stream. Thank all of you guys, of course, for tuning in.
Yeah, anybody who's been with us this past year, thank you.
Don't mind us if we celebrate a little bit here this evening. These were a gift to us from Kate, and we saved them for a special occasion. So figure what better way than to crack them open tonight. Hopefully I don't spill beer all over.
Here we go, ladies.
Yep.
Oh. We're good. So what is this guy called? What are we drinking here?
This is an Omegang Three Philosophers brew. It's a specialty brew. So yeah, let's see if it invokes the great minds that the three of us have.
Right?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't.
It always gets the juices flowing a little bit, right?
That's true. That's true.
Get you going.
Tom, you wanna give the viewers the whole rigmarole,
the whole
thing?
So yeah, what have we been doing this past year, guys? This whole entire past year. We usually say we're a science podcast show, but I guess you could say we do science news. We do anything science, anything you tag us in, any science things. Any science goes here on trèSci Weekly. So obviously we have our YouTube page. You got to make sure you're subscribing, following. We have a live chat, and we have Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all with the respective trèSci Weekly after the slash. And if you could give us likes, comments, or follows on any of those and any science things you come across, that would be great.
Now, Tom.
Yes.
I am clearly not a bartender, because if you look at this, look at this pour,
that's a lot of foam.
That's a lot of foam. The head is more than the body here. I think is how they would refer to it. This guy's that's my cup from before.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you this guy here. Actually, I'll give you this guy. Kyle said he didn't want too much. Just getting over being ill.
Yeah, you usually don't want to put alcohol in your body when you're sick.
That's for you, young lad.
Thank you, sir.
This one's for you, young lad.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. I don't know if you want the coaster. No, it's okay. Gentlemen, cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for joining us on any or all of these episodes.
And cheers to all of you out there. It's been a good year.
It's a pretty good beer.
It's a good beer, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So without any further ado, we'll commence the science. We'll get into the regular weekly
lightning round of stories.
Yeah, lightning round wrap up of different stories from throughout the week, and then we'll dive into a few other things before we depart. So, Tom, you've been doing such a valiant job leading us. Why don't you lead us?
I'll start with the first one.
Yeah, number one.
If we want to bring up the tweet, this one comes from us from Science News. It says, "Listen to a killer whale attempt to imitate a human saying hello."
Now, right away, Tom.
Okay.
I want us to drop the killer whale notation.
They're orcas.
They're orcas, right? They're not whales.
They're not. They're really not.
Yeah, they're more like dolphins. So, boo.
Boo.
No. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. So what's going on here, Tom?
So, this is a 14-year-old orca named Wiki, and it is in the Marineland Aquarium in France.
Okay.
And what they basically tried to do was tell it a word and then see if the orca could imitate the sounds of the word that it was given. And it turns out that it actually could match a lot of the pitches that was given to it.
Oh, wow. So we're talking to orcas.
Basically, yes.
What are we saying to them?
Well, said hello.
Okay.
That's what we started with.
That's a good introduction.
And then a few other sort of sounds and things to see if the orca could imitate the sounds.
Gotcha.
So we do have a few of the sound bites.
Should we take a listen?
I think we should see what the whale actually sounds like.
Okay.
I mean, the orca. Sorry.
Thank you. So,
but I want to note before we listen to it, the sound is actually coming out of the blowhole.
Oh, okay.
So it's not opening its mouth and speaking. It actually makes the pitches that it's making coming out of the blowhole where it shoots its air out that it uses to breathe when it breaches the surface.
That in and of itself
is pretty cool.
Pretty
right?
Impressive, right?
So let's take a look to see what these sound like.
Yeah, so this comes by way of Science News again. We're just borrowing their sound bites here that they've got running. But Kyle, if you want to go through some of the different ones there, I'm looking at the one that says hello. So you give me the countdown on when to press play, so we're all synced up here.
Hello. Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
All right.
So I think it started off a little bit stronger than the end, but it did a pretty decent job mimicking that one.
That's pretty impressive. Let's jump down to the strong raspberry.
Raspberry is the classic blowing a fart on your loved one's skin.
Yeah.
If you didn't know.
Ready?
These ones sound like a little bit something else you might have heard.
See, this one's tough because you can't really tell which one is the human,
or the whale.
Yeah.
It does a good job mimicking.
Yeah, I guess that's a testament to how close it is. And I guess let's go through the third one here, the 1, 2, 3, Kyle.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
That one's funny.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1.
This one's a little more eerie.
Yeah. Huh.
Very cool though.
Interesting, yeah. So, any idea why or where the idea came from to like talk to an orca whale?
I know that they're actually pretty good at following, I guess you could say, commands and things like that.
Okay.
That they, if you've seen them in like the marine world and things like that, they've actually done things where the whale goes on its side and it can bring up his flipper, and they have the command he can like come up out of the water to eat a fish, and they actually follow visual commands.
Right.
So they know that these are smart creatures, and I guess they just wanted to see how well can they even mimic our own language.
Yeah, it's very impressive, and of course I've been seeing a little bit more footage of orcas than I normally do, and other dolphin creatures. Been watching the Blue Planet.
Oh,
Tom.
yes. Mm-hmm.
It's been so good.
It is great.
Yeah, so good. However, I will say that after an incredible opening episode, I watched episodes 2 and 3 back to back on Saturday with Kayla and her dad. And by the end of the 3rd episode, it wasn't that the episode was bad, but I was like exhausted, just out of steam. You know, like there's just so much interesting content there to think about that I was like, wow, I just can't even take this in anymore. But no, it's fascinating to see how these marine animals are really like, they're just at the top of their game in that environment, right? They're like the humans of that ecosystem, you know, like
they're top dog over there.
It's incredible. So,
and then I also was reading that they, in their own communities, that they use imitation to communicate with each other, where they sort of try and match each other's sounds and pitches just to communicate between themselves. So that's probably where they drew on to see if they could mimic humans.
Interesting. So yeah,
And you obviously heard the sounds, did a decent job.
yeah. I mean, some are closer than others, obviously, but yeah, just the sheer fact that they can, you know, have this call and response activity between these two different species is really impressive to me. It definitely shows how smart these creatures are.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, moving on from orcas.
Moving on.
What do we got now, John?
Number 2. This comes by way from NASA. They say 40 light years away lie the 7 Earth-sized planets of the TRAPPIST-1 system. We now know that the planets are mostly made of rock. Some have 250 times more water than Earth. And 3 of the planets favor compact atmospheres similar to Earth, Venus, and Mars. So
we're starting to learn a little bit more about this.
yeah, so this is a kind of an update story for us. We covered the TRAPPIST-1 announcement almost a full year ago.
Yeah.
When NASA kind of released all this information about this planetary system that is orbiting a nearby star about 40 light years away from our sun.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a huge splash of news at the time because, you know,
there were multiple planets in the habitable zone of that star.
Right.
And they could possibly be rocky, and it was all super exciting when they first found it.
Yeah, and this was just an incredible thing to find. We don't normally find more than 1 or 2 exoplanets in any given star system at a time.
Yeah, it's tough to find them in general.
And to find 7 of them, and they're all small, somewhat Earth-sized planets was
that are terrestrial.
Right,
yeah,
just a huge news. So so some of the follow-up studies have been looking at the densities of these planets and trying to make sense of how rocky versus, you know, what their atmospheres might be looking like.
Yeah, just trying to get a little bit more of the details, right?
Yeah.
The nitty-gritty of what they're about.
And so, yeah, I had made some kind of negative predictions on that episode when we talked about it.
Yeah.
But these are proving me wrong here, Tom, which is nice because that means that the search for life in this particular system is still going strong, right? We're still very optimistic that we might be able to find signatures of life elsewhere in the universe, and this is a great first place to look. Having that much water is a real key ingredient to having a world that can host life.
Of course, yeah.
And having atmospheres that, what they were saying is that they're not made up of kind of loose hydrogen, that it's more compact. So similar to Earth and similar to the terrestrial planets in our solar system, and kind of not similar to planets like Neptune,
giants,
Neptune, Uranus.
Because if you're looking at a lot of hydrogen in your atmosphere, you're looking at a gas giant type planet.
Right.
So these, not only are these terrestrial rocky planets, but even in their atmosphere, you don't see the hydrogen. So that's even a better indication that they are not gaseous planets.
Right. And so I have a couple other tidbits here from the article that NASA put up that I thought were just as interesting. So they say that TRAPPIST-1e is the rockiest planet of them all, but it's still believed to have the potential to host some liquid water on the surface.
Okay.
So I guess the higher the density that you're kind of getting as a result of the simulation that you're running here, the less of a chance that you have maybe liquids or gaseous content on that planet. So they're saying that this particular planet is the rockiest, right? It's probably the densest, but it's still in a position where it could have water. So that's good. And then the other thing here was that at least 3 of the TRAPPIST-1 planets, D, E, and F, do not seem to contain puffy hydrogen-rich atmospheres, which we just kind of talked about a little bit here. So yeah.
So they are looking like terrestrial Earth-like planets that can have water on them.
Yeah. Really great stuff. Yeah. So this will be, of course, something that is followed up with future Hubble and other ground-based telescope
as
observations.
Well as when we mention it over and over again, the new James Webb telescope that we're super excited about.
Yeah, so that should be launching hopefully sometime next year.
And yeah, they'll continue to follow that star system as well as many other ones with exoplanets as they keep coming out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sweet.
So that's that for space.
Moving on from space, getting back down to Earth, but a little while ago.
Yeah.
This story comes to us from BBC Science News. You mind bringing up the tweet?
Sorry.
They just say Mayan surprise.
Whoa! Surprise!
Surprise! So, the Mayans, just as a quick little history.
Yeah, who were the Mayans?
Rigmarole. So, while you're learning all of your old European history and all the stuff that was going on over there, we don't really know a whole lot that was going on in Central America and in the near South America and even in the lower parts of Northern America where these older civilizations were, like the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Incas.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that these were pretty big, pretty established civilizations,
Mm-hmm.
and that there was a lot that they could accomplish, and they were pretty impressive. But what this did, this was a technique. They used something called LiDAR, which is basically like a form of echolocation almost, where they're shining in certain wavelengths of light and they're seeing how they bounce back. And what they were able to do in the Guatemalan forest, they're looking through the canopy of trees and then into the ground, and what looked like a smaller Mayan outcrop ended up being this sprawling massive city that, and so instead of around 5 million-ish people, they're saying this could even have been home to 10 to 15 million people at one point.
Wow.
And we don't know a whole lot about it, but that's amazing that we can now see it without having to go in through the jungle and get right up in there to try and find these things.
Right,
And
yeah.
look at the whole thing underneath it.
Right.
So pretty impressive, man.
Yeah. So, yeah, just judging from the image here, it looks like they've got almost like a full topography, like a map of...
Topographic map, the
Yeah.
elevations of things and everything.
So that's really interesting because not only do we get a sense of the size of this lost city, basically, but we kind of get an idea of how they built it, almost, right?
Yeah,
you can go
get the
in,
layout of
right,
it, yeah.
and look at, it looks to me like there's an outer wall that they might have fortified.
The study mentioned that they had fortifications, walls, and even moats.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they were trying to
protect themselves. Yeah. So there had to be rivals around there, right?
You would think,
right?
Yeah, or at least the wildlife.
Yeah, jaguars.
Yeah. We are talking about the jungles of,
Central America,
Central and South America. So, yeah, pretty dangerous stuff in there.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I wanted to bring up for me personally, when I first started learning about the Mayans, I was super, super interested in the fact that there were this many people, this many millions of people on another part of the world that we didn't really know about. And I was so fascinated that we didn't know how they all just sort of disappeared.
Yeah.
And then there's all those weird sort of stories about the Mayan calendar and the world ending on 2012. That's sort of where all that stuff came from. And that stuff's kind of nonsense that we all know, but
sure,
it's fascinating to think about, like, what did happen to all these people, and what happened to them. Would we be at risk for something similar in our own civilizations?
Yeah.
And when I was younger, that really was like a powerful thing to hook me into history, which I hated at the time. And I was like, you know what? That's kind of cool. I want to know what happened to these people. It was pretty cool.
The rise and fall of civilizations are certainly interesting because, some are well documented, like,
we
ancient
know sort of what
Greece,
happened,
ancient Rome. But in this part of the world, the record keeping is just not as well documented. So, it's just a mystery. This is very similar, Tom, to the pyramid story that we covered not too long ago.
Using a slightly different technique, but a way to see beyond what you can normally just gander at from normal observation techniques.
Yeah, it's really cool to see archaeology and anthropology and things. These
I honestly didn't see this coming.
Right,
archaeology, we're just peeking into places we had no idea we could have.
And these fields are just able to harness some of these technological advances and really make use of things that, I'm sure when LiDAR was developed, it wasn't necessarily developed for this reason. So,
it's a cool application for it.
Definitely.
And another thing this reminds me of is the original Batman Begins movie. Ra's al Ghul has to bring down the corrupt societies when they come too big.
That's right.
That's just a little joke. But.
Yeah. And then how does it go? He's tied in with Bane somehow in the third movie, right?
Yeah, and they're all just trying to bring down Gotham because it's too corrupt. But
Yeah.
Batman will save everybody. Don't worry. Moving on.
Moving on. Number 4. This one comes by way of Scientific American. They say a big step toward a blood test for Alzheimer's. A simple technique to gauge brain levels of a toxic protein could improve diagnosis in drug trials. So, yeah, I read this earlier in the week, Tom, and I thought this was interesting because Alzheimer's disease is one of these it's just eluding research in a lot of ways where, you know, we know what it does, and obviously it's a kind of a horrible thing for a person to go through and then family members around them to go through as well. And we have no real way of kind of diagnosing it at an early onset stage.
So you can sort of see how you might be able to treat it.
Right. So I read this and I was like, wow, this is really amazing. So what's going on here is some Japanese researchers actually looked at amyloid beta proteins in the bloodstream.
Okay.
And they were able to basically correlate the abundance of these proteins to the amount of cognitive disruption.
So the more of the amyloid protein that they find, the further you are into cognitive impairment.
Correct.
So if you have a lot of the amyloid protein, you're going to be in the Alzheimer's stage. And then as you get more and more of it, you enter the dementia stage, and then eventually will end up in the Alzheimer's stage.
Correct. Yep.
So that's why they're trying to use the blood test to test these levels, because it's very important to know at what stage you are along in your disease development in order to be treated.
Right.
So what makes the blood technique better than what's currently going on, John?
So the only current methods in order to get an accurate reading of your amyloids so far are PET scans, or they can do a sampling of your cerebrospinal fluid via like a spinal tap.
Yeah, so getting spinal fluid probably a lot more difficult than a blood test.
Correct.
Exactly.
And even though there are, of course, practitioners that do this with, you know, a wonderful degree of efficiency,
it's not a cheap, easy way to administer it to a lot of people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, if you were just interested in your general health as you're maybe getting into your mid to later years, and you want to see like, you know, there's maybe a history of Alzheimer's in the family,
yeah.
and you want to test it, well, it's going to cost you a lot of money to go and have this technique done. So what these Japanese researchers are looking into is making more of a streamlined method in order to just do a simple blood test, which would go a long way into then figuring out clinical trials for treatments and hopefully ushering in you know, some curative ways to you know, relieve symptoms of Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Whenever I hear Alzheimer's, I think of the movie The Notebook, the classic love story where she's losing her memory, and he has the diary and he reads it to her, and it's a super heartbreaking story when your loved ones forget who they know. That's about as crappy as it gets.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I mean, any way to tackle that is a plus in my book, right?
Yeah, definitely. And so so they found some success. They tested 373 people with this blood study, and they had varying degrees of
the amyloid protein.
Well, yeah. So, and they knew going into the study that certain people already are suffering from Alzheimer's and certain people are not, and they found a nice correlation with the amount of amyloids that matched up right with where these people.
It's looking like this might be a positive thing to do to diagnose it in the future.
Yep. And it also matched up when they then performed the more traditional PET scans or
the spinal
taps, and everything.
And it was in line with those too, so
right,
looking good.
Yeah, so this is big news.
Yeah, Nancy in the chat says the blood test would be pretty revolutionary, but they still need to come up with a better cure as it gets into the later stages of Alzheimer's.
Of course.
So yeah, you can treat dementia a lot better, which is the early stages of Alzheimer's, and that's the way you want to do it. So a blood test would be great to warn you that your amyloid proteins are getting higher and that you need treatment.
Yeah, but the
before
problem
you
is,
get to the Alzheimer's. But yeah,
what do you do with that information?
Exactly.
Right?
Well, now how do we really help it?
Yeah. So yeah, but this
is definitely the way to go.
Step in the right direction for then being able to do large scale clinical trials on people who are maybe at the same amyloid level to test certain medicines and things of this nature. So
cool.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next one, number 5, we've got woodpeckers. This comes from News from Science.
Yep.
Downy woodpeckers have accumulations in their brains of a protein that is also seen in football players with brain trauma. So, we all know woodpeckers, they go right up to the tree and they're whacking their head into it all day.
Yeah.
That's what they do. So, seems like a pretty good model to study brain trauma. This animal whacks its head against trees all day. We read an article, I don't know how much I believe this number, but they said 1,200 Gs of force slamming its head into a tree.
Yeah, so that would be 1,200 times the
force of gravity smacking its brain into the tree.
I mean,
so they're trying to see how the proteins seen in football players, how that trauma might relate to the football players. So it's not always just that it's a bad thing that you see this protein, but when it becomes an issue is you get the buildup of the protein, and then that can sort of move around in the brain and cause problems in other areas to lead to the condition that they use the abbreviation CTE, right? That's the microcephalos.
And chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Yeah,
exactly.
Snuffleupagus.
Yeah, so they're seeing the protein in the bird as well, but they're not seeing a lot of the CTE symptoms in the birds. So not necessarily that the protein is bad, but how it manifests itself in the human brain is bad. So now using the woodpecker as a model to study, seeing how it functions properly with the protein in their brain.
Right.
So using it as a model to study it.
Right. Yeah, this one struck me as interesting because, right, it's not so much that any major developments have come by way of studying how the woodpecker gets away with not having CTE, right?
Exactly.
So this is more just kind of, well, this is news. We want to throw it out there, especially in relevance to the Super Bowl last night. But there is, I guess you can make the argument that there is some evolutionary track that these woodpeckers have kind of followed along that have given them the ability to not suffer from traumatic head injury and brain damage.
Even though a lot of them would have a buildup of this protein from the trauma on their brain.
Right, right.
But we're not exactly sure how that goes about.
Exactly.
But that's why we're studying the woodpecker.
Right. But here's an example of an organism that should by all means have brain damage after smashing its head, over and over and over again to find food.
But nature finds a way. Yeah.
But nature finds a way. So if nature can find a way, then we can find nature's way. Maybe. Yeah, we'll see.
Yep. Cool. I like that one, man.
Yeah.
It made the. I don't think this is a super recent study, but I think it made the rounds because of the Super Bowl again.
Yeah. Definitely.
Good stuff.
And there are a few pretty hard hits.
There were. There were actually quite a few big whacks.
Yeah.
One guy actually got taken off the field.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got completely rocked.
Yeah.
They used to have that show that now looking back on it is in pretty bad taste. It's called like Knocked Up. And they would just show like the worst hits of the week, and they'd be like, "Oh, he got jacked up." And now, like, they don't do that anymore because we realize that it's kind of messed up.
Yeah, the ratings for that in 2018 would be
they would just
in the toilet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do remember that very vividly.
Yeah.
Karen in the chat says she loves watching the woodpeckers, and it doesn't seem they're hitting the tree that hard. I mean, it might not seem that way. But according to the study, they really hit it with a lot of force.
Yeah, and I mean, logically, they must be if they're able to drill a
through
hole
the bark.
in a living tree. You know.
Yeah.
That's some serious force. Moving on, number 6.
This one's cool.
Yeah, so this is more of like a preview type tweet here. This is Elon Musk saying that all systems remain green for launch at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for the Falcon Heavy launch. The long-anticipated Falcon Heavy launch, Tom.
Yep.
Are you excited?
I am, because this is one of the largest rockets we've ever tried to launch, right?
Yeah.
This is a big boy.
This is a big boy.
And as Elon Musk has alluded to, it's going to be really exciting either way. There's a ton of thrust that's going to be coming out, and it's going to be an impressive launch, as well as there very well may be some complications with this massive launch.
Yeah.
Which would also be explosive and...
Yeah, could be just
exactly
insane to watch no matter what.
So I'm going to be tuning in.
Yeah. I think so too. I shouldn't really have anything going on in the middle of the day tomorrow, so I'm going to try my best to watch it live. This is the story that we talked about where Musk said he was going to put his Tesla Roadster in the payload. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean,
I've seen a bunch of headlines that are like, don't worry about the payload, worry about where it's going.
Yeah.
So like he's trying to like stop worrying about that.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw Jeff Bezos on Twitter was congratulating, or basically saying like, good luck tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Cheering him on.
Yeah. Why not?
And last week we were talking about Elon Musk in his funny entrepreneur ways selling flamethrowers for cash.
They're sold out.
They're sold out.
They
already,
are sold
so
out.
We can't get ours.
Mm-hmm.
Darn it! I wanted a trèSci flamethrower.
I know.
Good stuff. But yeah, he's a funny guy.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
And last but not least,
oof, this one. So this one comes by way of National Geographic. When giraffes fight, slamming their heads and necks against each other, the impact can be heard from 100 meters away. So I first saw this and I was like, fake news. I was like, this is crazy. And then I thought about it. I was like, they don't really have any other way to go about tackling or fighting each other.
Yeah.
That's their weapon, is their heavy head that they then use to whip their neck and smack each other.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing to watch because you got to get right up next to your buddy if you're going to start whacking him in the head. So they're like standing hip to hip and they're just going at it.
Yeah.
Crazy, man. I had no idea that giraffes were this hardcore.
No, me
Not
neither.
a clue. Not a clue.
They're funny looking creatures.
They are, though.
Really funny looking creatures. I wonder now if the kind of like the
little spiky things up there.
I don't even know what to call them.
They're like stub horns.
Yeah, if that plays into this at all, right? If you have a sharper set of points on your head, then you could probably do more damage to a rival.
Yeah.
But I mean, who knows? I don't know very much about giraffes, just
Biology,
in general.
yeah.
Let alone their biology. I had no idea that they do this.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome though.
Yeah.
Giraffe dueling. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So then they were saying that an evolutionary advantage for a giraffe might be having a heavier head, so that as you whip it, you can get more weight and momentum at the end to whip your neck further.
Okay.
Pretty wild stuff. So that might be like the head honcho of the giraffe world in their community would be the dude with the largest head, possibly.
The only analog that I can even think of that's similar to this is the ankylosaur dinosaur with the club tail. Yeah. And they swing that thing around. And I mean, that's all theoretical, right? Like,
yeah.
We don't have any actual footage of that happening, but
I just thought this one was a really different view of the giraffes. You usually think of just, nipping the leaves on the top branches and just podding along.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Never seen an angry giraffe before, but now I have. And then, so this doesn't really come by way of Twitter, but I wanted to share some just general pictures of space that I saw over the course of the week. There were some really good ones, and I might do this,
each week.
As
trying
a
to find
thing.
The best ones.
So, Kyle, if you would be so kind as to bring up the first one.
So, real quick before we move on,
Sure.
Nancy made a great comment in the chat. I wonder if their brains suffer from the trauma as well.
That's a
great
great
they're
point.
Slamming the crap out of each other.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to check those guys out, too. Interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't think about that. Okay.
Yeah, and that would be a closer analog to humans because at least we're mammals,
Exactly.
right? Instead of
a bird.
Yeah, bird brain is quite different from our own brain.
It's actually an insult, bird brain.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So which one are we bringing up?
So the
moon?
first one here is this is a snippet of the moon, and this was during the super blood blue moon,
The
super blue blood moon,
Super blue blood moon.
yeah, which was on Wednesday of this past week.
Okay.
And in this particular photograph, which was taken by Bill Ingalls, who's representative of NASA, you can actually see the International Space Station photobombing.
That's
sort of,
transiting across.
yep,
Yeah.
coming right across there. So, yeah, just a neat little shot. There were a lot of really nice pictures of the super blood blue moon. Yeah, I don't even know.
Yeah. I saw a few good ones on Nat Geo and some other places.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to take a look at it in person, Tom?
Yeah, I did.
Nice.
It's looking good.
Yeah, it was. It's a full moon.
I like the moon. Yeah.
I know. Its red tint didn't really manifest over here on the East Coast because that has more to do with the lunar eclipse that took place on the West Coast.
Okay. Yeah.
So I feel like that was kind of the news headline that was going around, and I think some people thought that was what it was going to look like here, and it, might have been disappointed by it. But there were a lot of good streams, live streams that NASA
that you
did.
can always check out. Yeah.
Space.com did one as well, so I thought that was nice thing to do.
It's cool because a lot of the lunar phenomenons and the eclipses, you got to be in a certain part of the world. But now with the ability to stream it, you can check out these astronomical events.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. And then next up is a galaxy image that comes by way from NASA, the ESA, STScI, Aura, and JPL-Caltech. So a lot of collaboration went into building this image. And what we see here, Tom, are two galaxies. One is this kind of green oval shape here. That's what we would call an elliptical galaxy.
Okay.
And then the other one that's more of the pinks and the orange colors looks like it probably was in a spiral formation, but these galaxies are merging with one another.
So their masses are interacting.
Exactly.
They're changing. Okay.
And so the pink one is now been warped, so the star structure of it is kind of being influenced by the gravity of the elliptical one below it. And this has been called now the penguin and the egg. So
they think it's like the mama penguin looking over her egg.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
I can kind of see that.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I like now how astronomy mythos is going into figuring out what the galaxy structure shapes look like instead of just the constellations in the sky. Like we can actually look at planetary nebula and galaxies and come up with neat little things that they look like.
It's like
here on Earth.
The next scale of constellations.
Exactly.
We're going from individual stars to whole galaxies.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Definitely cool. So I thought that was very pretty, and this was making the rounds on social media as well. And then the last one here, Tom, and Kyle, if you don't mind bringing it up. This is a new image of Venus that was taken by the Japanese Akatsuki spacecraft, which is now safely orbiting around Jupiter.
Mercury.
Venus.
Sorry,
not Jupiter. I'm so used to talking about Juno.
Yeah.
So
this is Venus.
This is Venus. Yeah. This is Venus. And we get a really nice composition of the cloud structure here, which we've not really seen in previous imagery of Venus, because when you look at it with telescopes from here on Earth or the Hubble, it's hard to get that up close and personal definition to it. So you really kind of have to send an orbiter,
probe,
or a spacecraft nearby to get these nice shots of it. And now with the digital revolution that we've gone through in the past few years, these high definition photos are really showing us what the cloud structure of Venus kind of looks like, and how we can maybe compare that to our own atmosphere and other atmospheres of planetary bodies abroad. So
exactly,
really nice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So, how did the Friday poll go?
The Friday poll, Tom. Very good question. So again, tight week, which I think speaks to the questions I've been putting out there for the poll. This week, it came down to floppy disks versus cassette tapes. I was interested in these old forms of moving media around, and it turned out that cassette tape defeated floppy disk in a 15-13 vote.
Cool.
So, Tom, did you have any favorite cassette tapes back in the day, growing up?
I don't really remember, to be honest. I just remember the VHS tapes that were similar, but I don't really remember too many cassettes.
Yeah. We had a Weird Al Yankovic cassette tape.
Did you?
Yeah, that we listened to in the car, like, pretty much every time we were driving to and from.
It's pretty funny.
I remember specifically going to religion class, listening to Weird Al.
Listening to Weird Al.
And he has this one song about beards that I thought was funny, and then I would go to religion class and just draw beards on all the people.
Classic troublemaker.
Classic troublemaker. Yep. So, yeah. Floppy disk did pretty well, though. I thought floppy disk was going to win for a while because people coming back, texting me back with it were definitely gung-ho about the floppy disks. But
yeah, it's getting weirder and weirder to look back at past technology for me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. For a little while, it's like, oh yeah, that's what it used to be. But like, as we keep moving on, it's like, man, we are really just zipping on through things, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
we really are.
Now, you know, we just use the cloud for everything.
The cloud, yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Times are changing.
Times are changing.
Tom, we wanted to do something a little different this week, right?
Yes, we did. So we don't usually do too many Tom's Corners, but for this one, if you don't mind topping me off, we have our Philosopher's Beers. So I wanted to do something a little bit philosophical, and that is something called a thought experiment.
Okay. So what does that mean? So
a thought experiment it's just an imaginary sort of situation or scenario that you create in your mind it's not real, it's made up, and you just have a thought. You just basically go through the what ifs and like sort of create an experiment just out of thoughts of what might happen in certain situations.
Okay. And
that's actually very important in some of the new modern physics fields, like quantum mechanics and general and special relativity. You sort of need to come up with this story of all the variables and situations in your mind to come up with some situations to make sense of what's going on.
Right.
Because these concepts are so abstract, you sort of have to create a brand new thought experiment that doesn't exist here on Earth in order to come up with these phenomena.
Right.
So it's a tool that's used in science, but it's also a tool that's used in philosophy to get at topics such as morality, which is what's right and wrong, as well as ethics and things like that.
Okay. So we're going to go down the rabbit hole.
Basically is what you're telling me.
We're
going to do a little mini thought experiment, and hopefully when we come out of it, we have a new appreciation for some of the ways we view life.
Cool.
So it's a little tough to get into, to be honest, but okay. I think we should tackle this one.
Yeah, let's give it a try.
So here we go, getting right into it. This one is called The Nepalese Village. Now, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I'm just going to try and go through the points.
Okay.
So here's basically what it is. You are a child in Nepal, and you have tuberculosis.
Oh boy.
And if you're in Nepal, that's pretty bad, because you're not going to be able to get the necessary medical care that you need in order to help you out with your tuberculosis.
Okay.
So instead of it being something that needs to be medically treated, it's going to be a disease that's going to end up being fatal to you.
Wow. Okay.
So even if you go out and try and get the help that you get, they say you're not going to be able to find the medical care that you need.
I see.
So that's where we're starting from. You're going to need something around $2,000, they say, for the treatment. But that's something that a lot of them can't afford.
Right.
So that's the situation that we're in. Let's look at another situation. Here in the United States, there's something called the Make-A-Wish Foundation. I think we're all pretty familiar with that. But what that is that when you have a very sick child, the idea is that they get to make a wish. because they are terminally ill, which is horrible and sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So we grant them sort of a last minute hoorah. Like, what do you want to do, buddy? You know, like, let's do something nice for you on the way out.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty noble thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of times they end up spending around $7,500 per child.
Okay.
So now here's where the thought experiment comes in.
Mm-hmm.
We're spending $7,500 to allow a child to do one last thing before they pass away.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nice gesture, but that would be able to save over almost 4 kids' lives in Nepal.
Right.
So you see, it's a weird sort of thing to look at.
Yeah.
It's not that Make-A-Wish is a bad thing at all.
No.
I think it's a pretty awesome thing that got started. But when you do the thought experiment and weigh it, and then say, what if this money was in this situation? How would this play out?
Right. So, yeah. So if we took the $7,500
For that wish
and spent it on
the tuberculosis
medication, we could then save
those
lives.
But not grant the wish for
But
the
not
child
grant
in
the
the
wish.
United States.
Right. Yeah, that's a sticky one.
Right?
That's
It's
a
real
really
sticky one.
That's a really tricky
But
situation.
in the current situation in Nepal, you have tuberculosis, you die, and you don't get a wish.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
You know? So we're talking about 2 sort of different reference frames, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at 2 different levels.
So, in my eyes, it's kind of this utilitarian approach of like, well, do you save one person who's a doctor versus saving, 30 people who are criminals? Like, what is the value of life? Sort of, this is kind of what it boils down to for me. And I think that, yeah, it's so tough.
It's so tough.
It's so
yeah.
tough to make a determination on this one. I think that to save the kids in Nepal goes a long way towards, engendering this idea that we've got the capabilities to do good and to give these lives a chance when they didn't have a chance.
Okay.
And the $7,500 being spent through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, that's a beautiful effort, but it's ultimately money spent on a cheap thrill and not money spent on research that could go into that could go into a ultimate cure for whatever the terminally ill disease is that the child has. Now, of course, that's in a vacuum, right?
Exactly. So that's the thing with these things, right? Is we're here in the United States, we're in one situation, and in Nepal, they're in another one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole point of these thought experiments, is that it makes it difficult. It makes you compare 2 things you usually would not.
Right.
That's what makes these things so difficult and valuable.
Right. Yeah. If I knew somebody who was, a child that was terminally ill, or if I knew somebody who knew somebody even that was in that situation, I, of course, would not be saying, you know what you should do?
Yeah.
You should take your wish
money and just give it to those other ones.
Just donate it to Nepal.
You would never say that.
I would never say that.
Not a million years.
So
that's the whole point. Is just that's what's these thought experiments. You got to sort of put emotion aside to get the point across from these things. That's what makes them tough.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do is then transition to one that's very similar, and then we'll end on that one.
Cool.
So another one that's similar to the situation, I think many more people would have heard of this one, is the train scenario.
Right.
This is, we were talking with our buddy Dan, Dan Smith, shout out.
Shout out. Patreon supporter.
Ooh, yeah. There we go. That's why you get to shout out. So you got the train barreling down the tracks, and then you see it's about to hit 5 people. But if you pull the lever, then the train is going to go down the other track. You save the 5 people, but there's one person there who's going to die. So the whole thing is, are you going to let the train just go straight and kill 5 people, or are you going to pull the lever and let it hit one person?
That's kind of an easier one.
Right? You say, like, it's one person over the 5. Right?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, 5 lives versus one. Yeah.
That one seems kind of simple.
Yeah.
But now you give a little twist to it.
Okay.
Instead of pulling a lever, there's a big guy, one big guy, and if you push him in front of the train, he'll die, but it will stop the train before it hits the 5 people. So you gotta physically push this guy in front of the train, and it will end up saving the 5 people.
Yeah.
Now here's why this thought experiment is good and tricky.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you would just pull the lever and you would just say, okay, those 5 people live, the one person dies. But when you gotta physically push a person and cause them to die, that's something that I don't think anybody's gonna do.
No.
Ever.
No.
In that situation. Where it makes so much sense to us to say 5 people living is better than 1. But that's the whole value of the thought experiment.
Yeah. Because now it turns into an act of responsibility, right? Like, so
It's the emotional attachment to it, right?
yeah. So yeah, as a human, you cannot willfully send another human to their demise.
You know that's horribly wrong.
Yeah, it's just, I think you would just, in that situation, if you had the wherewithal to make the decision, I think you would have to just watch the 5, right? Because
you're not going to physically push this person who is safe and physically cause them to die that way. It's just it's the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I honestly wonder how many people would even ever consider the idea of like
sacrificing.
Hey, if I push this guy that's standing next to me, then I could save those 5 people. Like, that thought probably would never even cross my mind because of what the meaning of that. Right. Yeah. So, yeah. Whereas if I was standing at a lever and there were 5 people on one end and there was 1 person on the other, I might have the wherewithal to pull the lever and be like, I gotta save those 5 people over there.
Send that train over there.
Yeah. But who knows?
Yeah.
Really.
So the point of these 2 particular thought experiments is to show what is the value of life and what is the emotional attachment that the person has to those lives, and does that actually change how much we value those lives.
Mm-hmm.
So all from just a little thought experiment, you can learn quite a bit about you yourself, other people, and maybe society in general.
Yeah.
So I would like to continue doing things like this.
Yeah.
As we get into it, and then also talk about the thought experiments that these physicists and people needed to create up here in their head to come up with E=mc².
Yeah.
It came up from these imaginary situations they came up with.
Absolutely.
And we'll be heading in that direction.
Yeah. Very nice. I enjoyed that quite a bit. Hope you guys enjoyed that too.
Yeah, so that one's a little bit tougher to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still interesting nonetheless.
Yeah. So just as a disclaimer, no,
Don't-
Tom and I would not
not
murder
kill people,
anybody.
yes.
We're not going to murder anybody. Don't worry about it.
So just looking right back at the chat, Nancy said they thought they were so cool when they got cassette tape players in the cars. I can imagine.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you're like, yo, we got tunes now. Like, this is cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Nancy says, please do the thought experiments again. Yeah, they're very cool to think about.
Cool. Glad you enjoyed. Tom?
John?
This has been
episode 50.
1 year anniversary stream. Thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. And,
Thank you to Kyle as well.
Yeah. Thanks to Kyle. Thanks to Mushy. He's been here for all 50 weeks as well.
So cheers. And we have some ideas of change coming up in the future.
Yep.
And we're going to keep trying to improve the show as much as we can while covering all things science for you guys.
Yeah. So we'll see you guys next week. And until then,
stay science.
Exactly.
Take care, everybody.